Today's episode of Inimba drags every single relationship on this show into the light, and honestly, by the end of it you're left wondering if anyone in this family actually trusts anyone else anymore. Let's get straight into it, because there is a lot to unpack. We open on Zethu, and it's clear from the first scene that motherhood has hit her like a truck. She's exhausted, she's overwhelmed, and honestly, watching her try to hold it together is uncomfortable in the best possible way. This is good writing. Being a new mother was never going to be a walk in the park for her, and the show doesn't pretend otherwise. She's fumbling through night feeds, she's snapping at people she loves, and there's this haunting sense that she is barely keeping her head above water. What makes this hit even harder is that Zethu isn't just adjusting to a baby. She is adjusting to a baby while an entire storm of adult drama swirls around her, a storm she didn't create and can barely follow. Her sister Thumeka is around to help, technically, but the help quickly starts to look a lot like overreach. Thumeka clearly adores that baby, maybe a little too much. There's a recurring moment in this episode where Thumeka is holding the baby, cooing over her, treating her almost like her own child, and Zethu has to gently, and then not so gently, remind her sister who the mother actually is. "This is not your baby, it's my baby." That line alone tells you everything about where this relationship is heading. Sibling love is one thing. Boundary issues around a newborn are another thing entirely, and Inimba is setting up a slow burn conflict here that I don't think is going away anytime soon. And then there's Thumeka. If you've been following this season, you know Thumeka has never been subtle about her feelings towards Zethu, and in this episode those feelings boil over into something much more pointed. She's not just hovering around Zethu out of concern. She is pressing her, testing her, pushing her in a way that feels less like sisterly or family concern and more like someone circling an opportunity. Zethu even says it herself in this episode, practically pleading for space. She just wants to breathe. When your own family member is making you feel like you can't breathe in your own home while you're still recovering from having a baby, that is not a small thing. This is where the title of today's episode really starts to make sense. Thumeka's interest in this baby is not innocent, and the show is dropping enough hints that even casual viewers are going to start asking the same question: what exactly does Thumeka want with Zethu's child? It doesn't help that Zondo and Limus are also in the mix, trying to referee, trying to calm things down, telling everyone to just chill out for a moment. But calm doesn't seem to be in the cards for this household. There is an event on the horizon, an Amjidai, a traditional ceremony being planned, and every character seems to be using that ceremony as a battleground for their own personal agenda, whether they realize it or not. If Zethu's storyline is about exhaustion and boundaries, Lwandle's storyline this episode is about something much darker: betrayal, plain and simple. We've watched this brewing for weeks, but today it finally breaks open. Sydney, his own father, is left completely blindsided by what Lwandle has done, and the writers do not soften the blow. Here's what we learn. Lwandle has apparently been dealing with Lazarus, and not in some minor, harmless way. He has signed documents, real contracts, that hand over a stake, reportedly around 10%, tied to the family business. This is not a small betrayal. This is Lwandle taking something that was never fully his to give away and handing it to a man who has been circling this family's business for a long time with clear intentions of his own. When Sydney starts to piece together what has happened, his reaction is a mixture of disbelief and pure hurt. This isn't just a business dispute. This is a father discovering that his own son chose someone else's interest over his family's. What's especially painful is that Sydney doesn't even know the full extent of it yet. Right now, all he knows is that a contract exists, that Lazarus has shown some version of it, and that his son played a role in getting it signed. He doesn't have the complete picture, and that half knowledge is almost worse. It leaves him imagining the worst while still hoping there's an explanation that makes this all make sense. Spoiler: based on how this episode unfolds, there isn't one. There's a particularly telling scene where we see Lazarus quietly congratulating himself, essentially patting himself on the back for how smoothly he managed to get Lwandle to sign. He's proud of himself in a way that makes your skin crawl a little, because you can tell this was calculated from the start. He knew exactly which buttons to push with Lwandle, and he pushed them expertly. This wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness on Lwandle's part. Lazarus pulled toward this for a while, and Lwandle walked right into it. And here's the part that really stings, it sounds like Lwandle's own wife tried to warn him. She apparently told him, in no uncertain terms, not to go through with it. But Lwandle didn't listen. Whether it's pride, ambition, resentment toward his father, or something else entirely driving him, he ignored the one person who saw this clearly and went ahead anyway. Some of the other characters in this episode are blunt about it. They flat out say Lwandle doesn't seem to know how to use his own judgment, that he has a mind of his own but refuses to actually use it wisely. It's harsh, but after watching this unfold, it's hard to disagree. There's real fear now among the family that this betrayal isn't just going to hurt Sydney emotionally, it could genuinely threaten the empire that this family has spent years building. Some of the other characters are already talking about protecting what they've built, about needing to help safeguard the business before Lazarus and whoever he's working with can dig their claws in any deeper. There's a sense of urgency creeping into every conversation now. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is a fight to keep something they've worked for from slipping away. One of the more interesting threads in this episode belongs to Mr. Zondo, who seems to be several steps ahead of almost everyone else. He's aware that something is going on beneath the surface, and rather than reacting emotionally, he's playing it carefully. There's a moment where he essentially warns one of the other characters that she's now in a delicate position, that being connected to this unfolding situation could put her own career and reputation at risk if she's not careful about how she handles it. Zondo also draws a clear, almost cold line about hierarchy and information. He makes it plain that not everyone gets to know everything, that staff and even extended family are not entitled to the details of what's happening until the people at the top decide it's time to share them. It's a reminder of how tightly controlled information is in this world. Knowledge is power here, and Zondo clearly understands that better than most. Watching him operate with that kind of calculated restraint, especially while everyone else around him is either panicking or scheming, makes him one of the more compelling characters in this episode. He's not loud about it, but he is very clearly protecting something, and probably positioning himself for whatever comes next once the Lwandle situation fully detonates. There's also a quieter subplot involving Ko, whose parents, including Lazarus, are treated by Zondo with a very particular kind of formality. Zondo reminds Ko, in a way that feels pointed, that certain people are essentially just employees here, nothing more, regardless of how close they may seem to the family. It's a subtle power move, but it lands. This show is very good at using small lines like that to remind you exactly where the real authority sits, even in scenes that aren't overtly about conflict. Let's go back to Sydney for a second, because I don't think enough can be said about how devastating his position is in this episode. This is a man discovering, essentially in real time, that his own son may have chosen personal ambition or resentment over loyalty to their family. Other characters in the episode are quick to say they wouldn't blame Sydney if he decided to cut Lwandle off entirely, to chase him out of the family business or even out of the family circle altogether. There's an acknowledgement running through several conversations that Lwandle brought this entirely on himself, that if consequences come, they were earned. But underneath all of that judgment from the people around him, you can still feel Sydney's heartbreak. Anger is one thing. Watching your child choose the wrong side is another thing entirely, and no amount of "he deserved it" chatter from the rest of the family really softens that blow for a father. The show does a good job of letting Sydney sit in that complicated space, furious, humiliated, but still clearly wounded on a much deeper level than pure business betrayal would explain. Amid all this chaos, there's a traditional ceremony, an amjadai, being planned, and it becomes almost a symbol for everything this family is trying to hold together despite everything falling apart around them. Preparations are happening. There's talk of celebration, of family gathering the way families are supposed to when someone reaches a milestone worth honoring. It's genuinely touching watching some of the characters express real joy about this ceremony despite everything else going on. There's a real sense of pride from those preparing to celebrate someone reaching this milestone in their life, a reminder that even in the middle of betrayal and boundary crossing and simmering resentment, this family still has moments of genuine warmth and tradition that they hold on to. It's never too late for a fresh start, as one character puts it, and honestly, that sentiment feels like it's meant for more than one storyline running through this episode. Meanwhile, the relationship between Zolani and Zethu becomes a talking point ahead of the ceremony as well. It sounds like it's coming out into the open more directly now, with people questioning whether the two of them are simply close, or whether there's something more romantic developing between them. Some of the older characters worry openly that Zolani and Zethu are too young for whatever is happening between them, that their parents never actually agreed to or sanction any kind of serious relationship, and that all of this is just creating unnecessary friction at a time when the family can least afford more of it. Whether that romance is real or simply perceived by nosy relatives, it's clearly going to be a talking point heading into the ceremony. Away from all the scheming and heartbreak, there's a genuinely sweet moment in this episode worth calling out. One of the characters, clearly moved by everything happening around her and wanting to do something meaningful, starts thinking about putting together a small, heartfelt gesture, something involving graduation attire, meant to send a message and make someone in the room feel seen and celebrated. She's nervous about how it will land, worried it might come across as too much or not enough, but her intentions are clearly pure. It's a small moment, but after an episode this heavy with betrayal and tension, it's a welcome reminder that not every relationship on this show is transactional. Some people here are just trying to love each other properly, even if they're a little clumsy about how they show it. By the end of today's episode, Inimba has laid out several storylines that are clearly about to collide. Zethu is barely holding herself together as a new mother while Thumeka's motives around that baby grow more suspicious by the scene. Thumeka's attachment to her niece is heading toward a real confrontation about boundaries. Lwandle's betrayal of his father is now fully exposed, at least in part, and the fallout is going to be significant, not just for his relationship with Sydney, but potentially for the entire family business, with Lazarus positioned as the outside threat everyone should have been watching more closely. Zondo is playing a longer, quieter game than anyone else, gathering information and doling out warnings with careful precision. And through it all, this family is still trying to plan a ceremony meant to celebrate life and tradition, even as trust between its members erodes in real time. The title of today's episode isn't just a throwaway line. Thumeka wanting Zethu's baby is quickly becoming one of the most unsettling threads of this whole season, and if this episode is any indication, we are nowhere near finding out exactly what she's really after. Is it jealousy? Is it something more calculated, tied into the wider power struggle happening around the family's business and reputation? The show is being deliberately vague about her motivations right